Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about my recent reads. I think there was like 6 or something like that, but I just wanted to get into it. I'm always late to the wrap-ups, but it is 9 o'clock at night and I just, around 8 o'clock, I was like, I kind of feel like putting on makeup and filming, and that doesn't happen a lot anymore, so we need to take advantage of the feeling. But without further ado, let's just get right on into it. The first book I read this month, my stack is way over here, okay. The first book I read this month was In Holidays by Christina Lauren. So if you don't know anything about this book, it is about a girl who, her family and her closest family friend, I would essentially call them her family, but yes, they are family friends. They get together every holiday season for Christmas. It is like this tradition they've done ever since she was a child, or like even a baby, because it's her parents' best friends from college and they all moved to different places of the country, but they come together every Christmas to Park City, Utah, and they rent out a cabin and they just have a grand old time. But our main character, which I don't even remember her name, Maylin, so they call her May. Our main character has been in love with our other character, which again, I don't remember his name because it's been a month since I've read this. I feel like it starts with an A. Andrew. She's been in love with Andrew, which is like essentially her best friend slash longtime family best friend. And at the very beginning of this book, she ends up doing something that kind of puts her not in a good position with Andrew, and then all of a sudden on her way back to the airport, they get in a car accident and she wakes up on the plane and the trip has started all over again. So that is the premise of this book. It is a romance, and yeah. Sometimes I hate describing books because it's like, I know a lot of you guys, especially popular ones like this, probably already know all about this. Okay, so I ended up giving this book a 2.5 star. It obviously didn't impress me very much by my rating, and I will get into it a little bit why without giving away any spoilers, but the biggest parts for me was I kind of felt no chemistry at all between May and Andrew. In fact, there was almost more chemistry between, well, just towards the beginning. After it got into the plot, but towards the beginning there was a little more chemistry between her and Andrew's little brother. I forget his name. It doesn't matter at this point because he's like kind of an inconsequential character. But, well, at the beginning he's very important, but then he just fizzles off and does nothing. The other thing was there's this time loop aspect to this book. It's like Groundhog Day-ish. However, by the end of the book, and this isn't even the plot, so I don't feel like I'm giving away any spoilers, but by the end of the book, it's like non-existent. Like everyone and everything just pretended, like it may just pretend like all this stuff never, like the time loop stuff never happened. It just, anyways, there was no stake in this. I just did not care. It wasn't a bad book, but I just found myself not caring. So for that reason, it was a 2.5 star. The next book I read in December was Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This is the second book in the Lunar Chronicles series. I am so obsessed with these covers. I know originally, because this series came out, I feel like the first book came out in 2012 or something like that. So this is a very classic YA, sci-fi, dystopian kind of vibe book. Everyone knows about the Lunar Chronicles. But these covers are so much prettier. I don't even care that they're in paperback because they're literally gorgeous. Like this art is just stunning. And then they include like step back art. It's honestly just, oh, and I just realized what this part of the book this was from. Anyways, you can see that I tabbed it. I did enjoy this. I gave this, let me double check here. I gave this 4.25, which is a step up from what I gave Cinder. I think originally I gave Cinder a 4, but when I was like thinking back on it more, I definitely think it's more 3.5. I don't think it's a bad book. The reason it was a 3.5 was because I just didn't connect with any of the characters. This, I connected a lot more with the characters. I felt their emotions a lot deeper, and I also felt like the plot thickened so much, and it went from being Cinder, which was like kind of felt really lighthearted for young readers, to Scarlet, which definitely turned up the tension and angst. It made it feel older. It made the plot be a lot more scary, is maybe the right word. I liked this a lot more. I loved the romance in this. I love when you are constantly thinking in a book, is this person gonna screw us over? And then you're almost like crossing your fingers that they're gonna screw you over, but then at the same time you're like, wait, please don't do that. I love that in books. This was so good. I really love Scarlet. I really love Wolf. I don't remember what his real name is. I know his real name was something, but for some reason It doesn't matter, does it? His name is Wolf. Anyway, it also meshed the stories between Cinder and Scarlet really well. I was worried about that the mesh of the two stories were like, it wasn't gonna do it for me, but I think this did it really well. I was able to focus on Scarlet's story. Cinder's chapters were still really great, but I was still able to mainly focus on Scarlet, which is what I cared about most. The next book I read was Kingdom of the Wicked, and this is the stunning Fairy Loot edition. It has stencil sprayed edges, so they're black on top, black on bottom, but then this is like flowery. Personally, I wish the stencil sprayed edges would have matched like more of this vibe, which is the chapter headers. It's kind of like this craggly tree, and I don't know, like this is just kind of a darker book, and so like the flowers are gorgeous, but I feel like it's a little flowery for this story. Anyways, I'll shut up. What this book is about is we have our main character has a twin in their entire life. They've grown up together being super, super close, and they are this type of witch, and basically one night her sister goes missing and she has to form an alliance with one of the 7 princes of hell, which they go off of like the 7 deadly sins. Like, I'm struggling with remembering. Wrath is the main one. There's also like greed and gluttony and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it was very intriguing, and I can't say it was bad. I personally gave it 3.5 stars, and I typically write long detailed reviews for books, and when I don't write a long detailed review, that usually means I didn't care about the book that much, which is kind of a bad sign. I did tab this a little bit, but yeah, I wrote kind of a shorter review, but essentially what I said was, this is a decent book with a mildly interesting plot. It's not a bad book by any means. I just didn't really find myself connecting with our main character. I really, really loved Wrath. There's still a lot of secrets behind his character, and I want to know more. I read a lot of books. I mean, some people read way more than me, but over the last year and this year, I've read 70 books. I feel like my reading comprehension, like, I'm not trying to boast or anything, but I feel like my reading comprehension is quite well. But in this book, I feel like I never really fully understood what was going on. Like, these new things would come up, and rather than, I feel like we wouldn't get a chance to fully digest them, rather we'd jump on into something, and it was just like the next turn and the next turn and the next turn, and it was kind of just like, where were we again? I couldn't remember, and then because I couldn't remember, I lost interest in certain aspects, and that's just what happens. I also feel like our protagonist, which I forget her name, Amelia, she's kind of stupid, and like no tea, but like that's just the fact of the matter. Her stupidity kind of really annoyed me. I'm not trying to be shady, I'm just saying she was dumb. And my last critique was, I thought this was going to be way more romance based, because that's definitely how it was pitched as. This dark, essentially YA dark romance between a witch and this prince of hell, which like that alone can suck me in, but I just feel like the romance was barely there, like literally barely. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. I've read a ton of reviews where people are like, this was supposed to be a romance, question mark. Anyway, it's a good book. I do think that hopefully my interest stays over the next year, because I do believe that I'd want to read the next one. I tabbed it to prepare myself to read the next one whenever it comes out. The ending is a cliffhanger, so inevitably it makes me want to know what's going on. Anyway, I don't think it was a bad book. I think it was definitely overhyped, and hopefully the next one's a lot better. So the next book that I read is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is like a very popular adult fantasy story. I really, really like this. I'm gonna do my best to tell you what it's about, but it's like a very, very complex story. And this is definitely like chapter 1. And I feel like the rest of the series is the rest of the series. Does that make sense? I don't know. This just definitely feels like a setup novel. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about it. We've got our main character. Well, there's kind of a lot of main characters, but our main character is Vasilia, but they call her Vasya. Anyways, the book starts when she's like essentially a baby, and then her mother dies at the very beginning, and then she grows up in this big family in this cold freaking tundra in Russia area-ish, and she doesn't know it, but she has, essentially she's like got some sort of powers. We don't really know what they are yet, and there's this like Prince of Hell like character. I need to know exactly what his name is. Anyway, everyone's scared of him. I don't remember why. He's like this, I don't know. Okay, I don't know. There was a lot going on in the story and I didn't fully understand, but I enjoyed myself. Okay, anyways, this book takes place between like her being a baby and then all the way up until she is I want to say like 17, 18, but I'm not 100% sure. It could be 16. This is definitely not YA though. Even though she's a younger character, this is not YA by any means. This feels very old school fantasy and I loved the vibes I was getting. It felt like The Witcher, even though it has nothing to do with The Witcher. But those same, like that same writing style and the same storytelling style, especially the first 2 books in The Witcher that are the short stories. It felt very much like how the King of Elfheim learned to hate stories. That being said, if you don't like adult fantasy, you're definitely not gonna like this, but it had the, like I felt the same when I read How the King of Elfheim Learned to Hate Stories, because it felt very old school fantasy, the way that old school fantasy stories are told, and that's how this felt. It was gorgeous. The settings were stunning. There's a lot of complex characters, a lot of morally gray characters, which I loved. I hated a lot of them. I wanted to choke them, but at the same time, it made it super interesting. This does develop extremely slow, and I would go as far to say that the first couple of chapters are important, but then after that, like up until the 75% mark or 60% mark, there's like not a lot that happens, and I kind of wish that all would have been condensed into like a couple of chapters, but it's very, very, very drawn out. However, I do think that a lot of it is necessary. I just wish there was a more condensed way to tell that story, and I'm sure there is, but this is how the author chose to tell it, and so that's fine too. It's really beautiful, but I do think it could have been condensed. All in all, did I even tell you what I gave this? Gave this 4 stars, but all in all, I did really like this. I'm excited to see the budding romance between Vasya and our like forest demon prince, though I can't really remember his name at all, because there's definitely something there. And I really like his character, and I really like their connection so far, just like as friends essentially. The next 2 books are arcs, so I'm just gonna throw up a picture on the screen. And the first one is called The Aerys Gets a Duke, and basically the way this story plays out is we have our main character, her name is August. We have our main character August, she's an American, she lives in New York City, and one day her family goes over to England, and she meets up with one of her friends who recently just got married to a duke in England, and she finds out that her parents are trying to marry off her younger sister, but her younger sister's in love with somebody in New York. So stuff ensues from there. The love interest is the one that her parents want to marry her younger sister off to, but the love interest and her had already kissed. They met up they accidentally met up at this boxing match that she was not supposed to be at. That's definitely not where ladies are supposed to go at this time period. Anyway, lots of stuff ensues, lots of great romance. It was a good time. This does come out, just in case you're wondering, this month. It's supposed to come out on the 26th of January. And yeah, I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. Towards the first half of the book, I wasn't sure if it was going to be like a 3-star or 4-star. I didn't think there was anything inherently wrong with the book. I just didn't know if like it was going to be the kind of romance that I like. This did pleasantly surprise me though. This was filled with a lot of angst and tension, which is what I need. If there is not angst and tension in a romance book, I literally want nothing to do with it. Like that's just my style. That's what I want. It did surprise me though, because I feel like at the beginning it definitely started off a little bit more lighthearted and fluffy. And so I was really happy to see the turns it took to be more angsty and full of tension. I really like the strong-willed nature of our protagonist, August. She was very passionate about her goals and dreams, and she wasn't gonna let anything get in the way of those, which I can definitely appreciate. But something I love is when those kinds of people learn that their emotions and their romantic feelings are okay too, and they can coincide in the same world. I feel like a lot of books these days tend to take the other route, but this one was gorgeous because it was like she's very strong-willed, very passionate about her dreams. Nothing was going to get in the way of her career, but she also realized that love is important too, and they can coincide in the same world. I love that. Evan, who is our Duke, I can't remember what like his Duke title is, but his real name is Evan. He also fully accepted his emotions, which I loved. He actually like took charge of the relationship, which was a really nice turn of events. Like, yes, I do love the more angsty, moody boys, but like it was nice to read this, you know what I mean? Overall, the third act conflict was my favorite because it was a little bit of miscommunication, but this book was a lot of fun. I was really happy to have read a fun book like this. I read it on the plane. I actually did go home to California for Christmas, so I read it while traveling and I had a great time, and I think a lot of people are gonna like this. It's a great historical romance, so yeah. And last but definitely not least, I read one of my favorite reads of 2020 as the very last book. If you didn't read one of the best books as the last book of 2020, I'm sorry, but I did. This is an arc, and I'm just gonna start off by saying I did give this 5 stars, and that is very rare for me. If you know how critical I am of books, a 5-star book is very hard to achieve for me. That's just, and that's just how my personal rating goes. There's nothing wrong with doing it any other way. I've said this before, I'll say it really quickly. I just want to save 5-star books, 5-star ratings for books that like are genuinely some of my favorite books of all time. That's just how it works for me, okay? Anyway, this is The Descent of the Drowned by Anal Lal Din. I really hope I'm saying that right, and I apologize if I'm not. This book, first of all, that cover, so eye-catching. It is stunning, and the detail is really cool, and I love how gritty, and just by looking at the cover, you know that this is going to be a very like dark read. This book is really hard to kind of describe like the premise, so I'm going to read a little bit about it, and I hope that doesn't bore you guys. But essentially, this is set in a colonized Indo-Persian world and inspired by pre-Islamic Arabian mythology, okay? So it's got really cool inspiration behind the book. It's, the world building was some of the best. Okay. Basically just says, she is bound to serve, he is meant to kill. Survival is their prison, choice is their weapon. As the sacred slave of a goddess, Roma is the lower caste that serves patrons to sustain the balance between gods and men. What she wants is her freedom, but deserters are hunted and hanged, and Roma only knows how to survive in her village where women are vessels without a voice. And then I'm gonna skip a little bit, but then Leviathan, I say like Leviathan, but there's no N in the middle, so, but also his nickname is Levi, is the bastard son of an immortal tyrant, raised in a military city where everyone knows of his blood relation to the persecuted clans. Levi is considered casteless, lowest of the low. Graduating as one of the deadliest soldiers, he executes in his father's name, displaying his worth. They call him the Blade, by the way. Basically, what happens is their two worlds collide in a very inconvenient way for both of them, and they end up developing this deep bond that's also very inconvenient for both of them. They do not want any part of that, and let me just start off by telling you that this is literally flawless, essentially, in my mind. First of all, there are trigger warnings at the beginning of this book, and they're very important, so please look up this book, but please also look up the trigger warnings. In my copy, they were at the very beginning, and I believe that's how they're going to be printed. And look up reviews too, because they also include them. This book blew me away. This is very dark. I would go as far to not call this YA, but I think it is published as YA fantasy. To me, it definitely feels more new adult. It has very heavy themes, very heavy topics, and the characters, their ages are not specifically stated, but I think Levi is like in his early 20s and Roma is like 18 or 19, so it definitely could fall under YA, but I definitely would consider this more new adult. My favorite parts of this book were the culture and the world were described to perfection. The author made it so you genuinely felt like you were walking inside of this novel, and it was entrancing to read. And I am not one to be obsessed with world building, so saying that kind of means something, that I was obsessed with this world building. We do get dual POVs. They jump back and forth between Roma and Levi, and it was chef's kiss, incredibly done. There is a plot, but I will say with all respect that the plot is definitely like second in this book. The most important things in this book are world building and character development, with a little more emphasis on character development, which is my favorite way to read a story. My favorite way to ingest a story is like one that's just mostly about character development, because I find that I love books most when I can relate to the characters, and the best way to relate to characters is given all the information possible and watch them go through these journeys and have that be the focus. Both Roma and Levi are these extremely dark people who have overcome already so much and still have a ways to go to fully overcome some of the horrible things they've gone through. But because of that, they have these, I think they have these dark demons lurking in their shadows, but they both learned to embrace that part of them, which was so good. Okay, I cannot say, like, I could just go on about how much I love this book. This book does kind of end off on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I loved the ending. I cannot wait to see what's next to come. I will purchase this for myself, and I want to reread it and tab it because it is a very dense book, and there were times I found myself having to go back and reread a couple of paragraphs just so that I felt like I knew what was going on. I didn't want this book to end. It was incredible. I loved, like I said, I loved the emphasis on character development and the stunning world that this is set in. I mean, it's a very corrupt, horrible world, but it's stunning at the same time. And I really loved the hint at the magic, and I want to see what happens more in this world, and I want to know more about these characters. As soon as I swiped the last page on my phone with this digital art copy, I wanted more, and that's just when I know I was obsessed. Please add this to your TBRs. Please, please, please. It comes out, let me get the date, because I really want you guys to, March 15th. It comes out March 15th. So please add this to your TBRs. Pre-order it. It is so good. Ugh, I cannot wait for this book to hit shelves, and I cannot wait to pick up my own copy. And yeah. Okay guys, so that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you guys have any similar thoughts or feelings on these books, or if you've read these books, or if you haven't read these books, if you got any thoughts or comments, please leave them down below. I love responding to comments, so you can always respond to me there because I will reply. But with all that being said, I'm gonna let you guys go. Have a great morning, noon, evening, day, night, whenever happens to be that you're watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.